afternoon, everyone. Today, we are here to discuss the Foreign Trade Policy 2023. And what we are going to discuss today is what are the key features of this foreign trade policy, how is it different from other policies which have been there in the past, and certain new chapters which have been added in the foreign trade policy. Alongside that, I will also discuss as to how can we take the maximum benefit out of this foreign trade policy, though apparently many benefits have been curtailed by the government, like MEIS or SEIS, they haven't been continued, but there is a historical background to that. I'm sure that everybody is aware about that. So I'll touch upon those particular aspects as well. So now to start with this foreign trade policy, the interesting part you would have seen that the name of this policy is Foreign Trade Policy 2023. Unlike the previous policies, which were like Foreign Trade Policy 2009 to 14, 15 to 20, but this policy is named Foreign Trade Policy 2023. Why? Because this policy is intended to be continued for a longer period of time than the earlier practice of having a policy of 5 years and then getting it renewed or amended every 5 years. So this policy is going to continue for a very long period of time. And if government wants to make any changes, wants to bring any new scheme, then this policy will only be amended and no further new policy will come. So this policy, that is why is named as Foreign Trade Policy 2023. Now, what are the topics we are going to cover here? We are going to cover export growth potential of India, key changes in new FTP, overview of various schemes that also we will discuss. Then how to club various schemes to maximize benefit for our organization is something also we are going to touch upon. SCOMET is a very interesting topic and that we are going to discuss in brief as to how it is applicable to our organizations, the export of commodity or services or software doing, export of these things is impacted by the SCOMET and the Amnesty Scheme. And in the later part of presentation, we will touch upon the question and answers. Now to understand as to where do we stand as a country, where are our exports going? If we look at the data of last 3 and 4 years, what is visible is that our exports are continuously growing, which is a good part. But the concern here is that the imports are also gradually increasing. And the rate of increase in imports is higher than rate increase of exports. Because of that, the trade deficit is continuously widening. And that is a cause of concern for the government. So exports haven't been much of worry. They are continuously growing, but imports certainly continue to pose a challenge. If I talk about certain, statistics with you, our trade deficit means export minus import. So imports were higher by 161 billion in the year 2019-20. which in the year 2022-23 are expected to be 246 billion. So there is a further gap of 80 billion in the import, or imports are higher by 80 billion than the export of the country. So this has been a cause of worry to the government, and government has certainly been taking a lot of steps to curb the imports, to focus on local manufacturing under the Make in India program. But these programs, I think, will take a little time to give their actual benefits. And in the meanwhile, we will have this situation continue for certain more number of years. In this direction, to increase the exports, government is entering into various free trade agreements. Recently, we had the free trade agreement with UAE. We are expecting to close the free trade agreement with UK, EU, Canada, and other countries. The discussions are at advanced stage. Recently, government has also allowed foreign law firms to operate in India so that our lawyers also get international exposure, and the international firms can also come here and give their experiences and the practices. Likewise, foreign university recently, Australian universities have been allowed to operate here in India. So these are some of the mutual trade program or mutual sharing of businesses government has started. But again, the trade deficit remains an area of concern, which I think the Make in India program is going to support a lot. Alongside that, government has also introduced various production linked incentive programs to enhance the local manufacturing of goods so that we are not reliant on imports any further. Now, if we talk about the foreign trade policy, so this is a policy, this is not a law. But what is the law? Because every policy which is enforced or which is giving any benefit, that policy should have a backing of law. So foreign trade policy is issued under the Foreign Trade Development and Regulations Act. That is the enactment under which this policy comes. Who formulates and administers? Directorate General of Foreign Trade. How many part of it are there? So one is the foreign trade policy, another is the handbook of procedure. Handbook of procedures is nothing but a summary of all the procedures which are required to implement the policy. And then standard input output norms for various products are also part of foreign trade policy. As I discussed earlier, there is no end date to this particular policy. It will continue for more than 5 years or beyond 5 years. You would remember that the last policy was FTP 15 to 2020. From 2020 to 23, we haven't had any new policy. The existing policy was continuing, and there was a dilemma in the mind of industry as to what is the new government is going to bring in this new policy. So government has introduced 2-3 new chapters in this particular policy. We will discuss them, and we will also discuss their relevance in our businesses. One major policy decision which government has taken in this foreign trade policy is that they would not give any kind of incentives on export of goods or services. It would only be a remission regime now, wherein whatever duties and taxes you have paid on manufacturing of goods or provision of services, only they will be reimbursed to you or refunded to you. Government will not incentivize anything. Partly this is because we had a dispute with United States in WTO and that we lost. And when we lost that dispute, WTO had mandated that India should not incentivize the export of goods or services. That is why MEIS and SEIS kind of programs have been stopped. The corporate tax benefit which was given to SEG units was also stopped in the year, I think, 2020. So this is a major shift which we have to remember, that the SEIS kind of a scheme, Service Exports from India kind of a scheme, are not going to come anytime in the future, as they have been in the past from the year 2015 to 2020. In this policy, government has introduced 3 new chapters: developing districts as export hub, promoting cross-border trade in digital economy, and SCOMET. Now, these 2 chapters, chapter 3 and chapter 9, are a very futuristic program wherein government has shown its intent that every district will be identified with a product which can be exported out of India, and the local economy of that particular district can be boosted. But there are no direct benefit given to the companies in this. It will be a wider program wherein the entire area will be developed as export hub. Similarly, cross-border trade in digital economy, this is basically e-commerce goods, e-commerce trade of goods and services government is talking about, wherein the intent is to promote the e-commerce sale of or digital sale of goods or services. Again, there is no direct benefit provided in the policy for this particular kind of promotion. Some support, financial support, can be provided by the government if somebody is developing a center for export of e-commerce goods or services, but that there is no direct incentive on exporting the goods or services through postal mode or through courier mode. SCOMET is very important. We will discuss that little in detail as we move forward. Now, further in foreign trade policy, what does it do? The basic objective of foreign trade policy is not to grant the incentives. The basic objective is to regulate the import or export of goods from India. What does it mean? It means that we always read in the newspaper that the government has, restricted the import of a particular commodity in India, or government has restricted export of a commodity. Those restrictions or those allowances are granted by the government under foreign trade policy. So any item which is freely importable in India or freely exportable of India, the permission of that comes from foreign trade policy, not from the customs act. So foreign trade policy has a regulating power. Customs law of India has only powers to levy duty and to implement the regulations made by the foreign trade policy. Under foreign trade policy, the goods are categorized in 3 categories: free, restricted, and prohibited. Free goods are those goods wherein you don't need any permission from any authority for their import or export. Restricted goods are those goods wherein you require a license or permission from any authority, maybe DGFT or Ministry of Commerce or Ministry of Steel or Ministry of IT. From any authority, if you need any kind of license, then those goods are called restricted goods. Prohibited goods are those goods which you cannot import or export at all. Only government deals in these goods. So like arms, ammunitions, nuclear material, these goods are completely prohibited. Nobody can, or drugs, nobody can import or export them. Only government has power to import or export them. Likewise, foreign trade policy also provides that if there are any licenses, approvals required under any other law for import or export of any item, then those should also be obtained at the time of import or export. So like pharmaceutical products require permission from Ministry of Health or Ayush Ministry. Those licenses or permissions should be present at the time of import or export. And this requirement comes from foreign trade policy. One more important change which this foreign trade policy has brought in is that merchanting trade has been allowed from India. And this is subject to permission from Reserve Bank of India. Now, what is merchanting trade? Merchanting trade is basically supply of goods or services from one country to another, but those goods do not come to India. So suppose if some goods are coming from US, so an Indian company buys goods from US and delivers them in Sri Lanka. So those goods are not coming here to India, but their realization or the foreign currency will be coming to India. Those transactions are called merchanting trade, wherein you are acting as, or Indian company would be acting as a merchant trader. Those transactions have been restricted, not under exactly foreign trade policy, but RBI guidelines were not very supportive. Now government has provided that they will allow merchanting trade and the RBI guidelines need to be followed. So this is a very welcome step, so that Indian companies can also do bill to ship to arrangement. So merchanting trade in a common parlance can be called a bill to ship to arrangement, where goods will not be coming to India, but an Indian company buy and sell the goods from one country to another country. This is very important. The IEC has been made mandatory to be obtained when you are rendering these services for availing any benefits under FTP. Earlier, the provision was that, or people were contesting under SEIS scheme, that when they filed the application for SEIS, IEC was mandatory at that point in time, and there have been litigation in the court of law on this particular point, whether IEC was mandatory at the time of filing SEIS application, or IEC was mandatory at the time of rendering the service or export of service. Now FTP has clearly provided under this foreign trade policy that IEC is mandatory when the goods or services are exported. Now, what are the penal provisions if you violate the foreign trade policy? If you violate the foreign trade policy, then two laws are applicable here: FTDRF, Foreign Trade Development and Regulations Act, and Customs Law. What are the penalties under Foreign Trade and Development Regulation Act? The penalties are quite high. I mean, customs law penalties are nowhere compared to what penalties are provided here. Like 5 times of value of goods involved in the violation, 5 times of value of goods, or minimum 10,000 rupees. Very high. Generally, DGFT authorities are liberal. They do not punish exporters with very heavy hand. But this is what the law provides. If somebody is caught doing something illegal with a malified intention, then very severe penalties are provided. IC can be suspended, which can stop entire export or import business. Key managerial personnel can also be prosecuted. Apart from this, customs law also provides that if anybody has got any script with misrepresentation of facts, then he is liable for penalty, which in case script value is more than 50 lakhs, then the imprisonment up to 7 years is also provided. Apart from that, goods are also liable to confiscation if the required permissions are not obtained from the relevant ministries or DGFT authorities under section 111 of the Indian Customs Act. So penalties are quite severe. So one has to be very, very careful while dealing with the incentive program or any kind of permissions of DGFT authorities. Now, what are the various schemes under foreign trade policy? So we have divided these schemes under 3 buckets. First is the pre-export schemes, second post-export schemes, and status holder. Under pre-export schemes, we cover advance authorization, DFIA, and EPCG. Post-export scheme, SEIS and MEIS were there, but they have now been discontinued. But RoSTCL and RoDTEP continue to be there. Duty drawback continue to be there. Status holder in the form of EOU, STP, and SCG continue to be there. One thing to remember, I have written here SCG, but SCG is not part of foreign trade policy. I have just written it here for the sake of discussion. EOU and STP are part of foreign trade policy. SCG is governed under a different law. Now we will go to each scheme one by one. If we talk about advance authorization is a program wherein the importers are allowed duty-free import of inputs, consumables, packing material for manufacture of export product. Now, who can import? So any manufacturer exporter or merchant exporter who has an alliance with a supporting manufacturer, he can take the benefit of this particular scheme. So you import raw material, packing material, consumables without payment of any duties, manufacture any product, export it out of India, and then you don't need to pay any import duties on your raw material imports or the packing material import. So this gives a lot of cash flow benefit to the importer, as well as saving of basic customs duty, because you don't pay basic customs duty at all. And when you export, your obligation to take basic customs duty is remitted by the government. Now, how does government control this? How much input you are importing or how much input do you require to manufacture a particular export product? That is provided under the SION norms, Standard Input Output Norms, SION. So Standard Input Output Norm is a book wherein the government has notified as to manufacture a particular 1 kg of one particular export product, how much input is required. So government has notified to manufacture 1 kg of, suppose, a steel bar, this much of steel is required, and this much of wastage is generally generated. So you have to declare your output to the government. This is what I intend to export, and in proportion to that, they will allow you the duty-free import of inputs. one basic feature, one very important thing to note about here under foreign trade policy and the advance authorization scheme is that the whatever value addition you are doing means the value of your export product should be at least 15% more than your import product. So minimum 15% value addition you have to ensure. You cannot bring the material here in India, just packet it another packing and then export. That is not allowed. 15% value addition, not in quantity terms, but in value terms, has to be there between imported product and the exported product. Government grants you time of 18 months to bring the material here in India and export. So from the date of license, you have 18 months to import anything and then export. If you don't export within 18 months, then 2 extensions of 6 months each are allowed to you. And after that, you are required to submit your documentation to the DGFT authority, and they issue you export obligation discharge certificate. And that is then furnished to the Indian customs authorities for redeeming the bank guarantees or the bonds which are given to them against the duty-free imports. Suppose if you do not have visibility as to how much exports I am going to do in a particular year, but or in a particular consignment or in a particular month, but broadly you have an idea that okay, this much of export I am anticipating this year, then you can go for advance authorization for annual requirement. But you have to have export performance at least in past 2 years, and government will give you an advance authorization for annual requirement, wherein based on your annual export projections, you can import the material, so that you don't have to go to government to obtain advance authorization every time. So advance authorization scheme covers raw materials, packing material, and consumables. Now what about capital goods? Capital goods are covered under EPCG scheme. Likewise, if you want to import any capital goods for manufacture of export products, you can import them without payment of any customs duty. You manufacture your product and export outside India. You don't need to pay any customs duty at all. Government gives you a time of 6 months to complete your obligation to export. Now, how much obligation you have? You have 6 times of duty saved. Our export obligation is 6 times of duty saved. That you have to complete in a period of 6 years. So the formula is 6 into 6. 6 times in 6 years. But this is not all. Suppose you are already doing exports, you take benefit from the government and continue with the same level of exports. Then you are getting, you are not generating any additional export. Government is not in favor of that. So what they have done, they have said that you have to maintain average level of export of your past export performances in last 3 years for that particular product, which you are going to manufacture from the duty exempted machinery, not for the entire product line. That average export you have to maintain, and beyond that average export, whatever exports you are doing, that will be considered against the completion of export obligation. For an example, if you are doing 100 crores of export in preceding 3 years, then your average export obligation will be 100 crore for the current year. For any export to be counted against EPCG scheme, you have to first do the 100 crores of export, and after that, whatever incremental exports you do will only be counted towards the completion of export obligation. Otherwise, it will not be. Otherwise, it will be called that you are short of export obligation. In case of export promotion, EPCG scheme and advanced license scheme, it is not compulsorily you have to import the material from outside India to get the benefit. You can also locally procure the material. So within India, if you procure the material, then IGST is paid on that, but that IGST is refunded to you. So as you know that the GST is a value-added tax regime. So tax is not exempt here like imports. Tax is paid and then it is refunded. So you save the duty in case of local procurements as well under the EPCG scheme as well as the advance authorization scheme. So your capital goods as well as raw material can be procured locally. Apart from that, deemed export benefits are also available if you are buying any product under EPCG scheme or advance authorization scheme locally. What are deemed export benefits? That we will discuss later. Now here we have discussed some of the changes. So the broadly EPCG scheme and the advance authorization scheme have not been changed by the government. They have been kept same. Only in case of EPCG scheme, the import period has been extended to 24 months, which earlier was 18 months. Otherwise, there is no change as such. The scheme continue as they were earlier, which is again a good news because MEIS has gone, but EPCG and advance authorization continue. These schemes were not objected by WTO also because they are in the form of remission schemes. So they will continue for a very long period of time. The Amnesty scheme which we are listening or which was announced in the foreign trade policy announcement on 31st March also covers only advance authorization and EPCG scheme. We will discuss that later on. One very important change government has done under advance authorization and EPCG schemes is that government has significantly reduced the application fee under both the schemes. Like for MSME, the fee is just 100 rupees if they are taking license of value up to 10 crores. About 10 crores, they have to just pay 5,000 rupees. In case of non-MSME, the fee is little higher, but again, it has significantly been brought down. If we talk about the timelines, again, the government has posed a very aggressive timelines, which is in the benefit of industry. Advance authorizations, which were earlier taking time of 3 to 7 days, will now take 1 day time. Likewise, EPCG license, revalidation of authorizations, extension of an export obligation period will take only 1 day time, which was earlier taking a lot of time. Revalidation of authorization means the import period of the authorization is increased by the government. If you are not able to import the material from outside India within the prescribed time, then it is increased. There is a particular scheme called self-ratification scheme under advance authorization. So as we had discussed that what are input-output norms, that for to manufacture a particular quantity of export product, how many inputs would be required, that is written in the standard input-output norms. But certain categories of people have been allowed to self-ratify their norms if their norms are not fixed in the cyan book. So they will self-ratify that, okay, in my product, the norms are not provided in the book. So I am self-certifying that in my case, this is the ratio of input and output, and government would allow. Now this benefit has been allowed to status holder. The status holders are, we will discuss that later. Status holder are the exporters who are given the status of good exporters. So they, in their case, they can self-certify that this is the input and output in their case, and they can apply to DGFT for advance authorization, and it will be given to them. Similarly, in case of battery electric vehicles of all types, vertical farming equipment, water waste treatment and recycling, and green hydrogen products, government has said that they will prescribe the reduced export obligation under EPCGs. We discussed about the maintaining average level of export 100 crores per year in last 3 years. Dairy sector has been exempted from maintaining the average export obligation under EPCG scheme. It has been done to promote the technological upgradation of dairy sector. Similarly, a special advance authorization scheme has been extended to export of apparel and clothing sector on self-declaration of cyan norms. duty drawback. So what is duty drawback? Duty drawback is basically reimbursement of notional customs duties on any export product. Notional basic customs duty. What is the meaning of this? The meaning of this is that even though you have not imported any product which is incorporated in the export product, still you are eligible for duty drawback. The basic assumption is that all the products which are imported here in India would have some element of imported product. Like, even if you are manufacturing something and exporting out of total domestic procurement, but backwards, somewhere those products would have used the petroleum product. Petroleum products sometimes require, petroleum products sometimes attract basic customs duty, or it has used some plastic material attracts basic customs duty. So your inputs, which even though may be totally made in India, they would have some element of imported material in all the cases. And that is why I have used the word notional basic customs duty. So your export product will always have some element of notional basic customs duty or imported component. And government says that we will identify that and we will refund you that in the form of duty drawback. Now, who can claim duty drawback? Any manufacturer, exporter or merchant exporter who has manufactured the goods here in India. If the goods are traded goods, duty drawback is not available. What is duty? How is it granted? So at the time of filing your export shipping bill, you will mention that you want to claim the drawback. You will mention the drawback schedule number, and the drawback amount would automatically be credited in your bank account. Drawback is computed on the FOB value of export. Whatever your FOB value of export multiplied by drawback rate prescribed by the government, will be your drawback amount. In case you feel that your export product has actually suffered some imported, contains some imported material, and you have paid basic customs duty on that, but the drawback rate is insufficient and you are not getting full refund or reimbursement, then in that case, you can go to government and ask for fixation of a special drawback rate, which is called a special brand rate for your product. But the condition is that the general rate, which is called AIR or all industry rate, should be less than 80% of actual duties paid by you. Means if you have paid basic customs duty of 100 rupees, but the AIR rate or the general rate fixed by the government is 78 or 79, then you go for the special brand rate fixation and request government to reimburse you. That process is not very cumbersome. It takes 2-3 months time and the money then comes to your bank account. So highly recommended for all the exporters to evaluate whether they are getting full cost of basic customs duty reimbursed on their product or not. It is very important to know that if your product is specifically exempt from basic customs duty under any of the schemes, then you are not eligible for duty drawback. Likewise, the EOU, SEZ, advance authorizations are specifically not allowed duty drawback. One important point to be noted here is that the drawback amount in any case cannot be more than the market value of the product, though it is very unlikely. But this is one of the condition or the upper cap of drawback amount, that it cannot be more than the market value of the product. Now, suppose if you have already exported the material and you missed claiming the drawback, then what to do? That's a very common problem which exporters face. In that situation, you have an option of approaching the customs authorities, requesting them to at least amend the shipping bill to grant you the drawback. This I have seen generally getting into litigation, but if the amounts are substantial, then there is no harm in filing the appeal against the drawback shipping bill and request customs authorities to amend it so that you can claim the benefit. Generally, if you have taken any other benefit under the shipping bill like EPCG or advance authorization, then authorities allow duty drawback or amendment of shipping bill for duty drawback. Though sorry, advance authorization is a bad example because it is an excluded category. So if you had taken any benefit like suppose MEIS, RoDTEP, etc., in that situation, the amendment is easier than in other cases. Because in that case, customs RMS system already validates the shipping bill, and there is a chance that they will monitor that export wherein you are claiming RoDTEP high. MEIS was a program wherein we were getting a lot of good amount of export incentive from the government, but unfortunately that was replaced by MEIS scheme, sorry, RoDTEP scheme. RoDTEP is similar to MEIS. You export your product, your shipping will goes to DGFT and you are granted the RoDTEP benefit. Process is quite simple, so I'm not going to discuss that much in detail. Any questions you can ask. Now, what are the duties which are remitted by the government under the drawback, RoDTEP scheme? Are these VAT and excise duty on fuel, VAT and excise duty used in generation of power, VAT and excise duty on fuel used in running of machines, electricity duty, mandi tax, municipal taxes, stamp duty, blocked ITC, and blocked ITC due to default of suppliers. So these taxes and duties which are cost in your supply chain are covered under RoDTEP scheme. If you feel that the RoDTEP rate in your product is very less, then it is a time to make a representation for the government to the government for revision of RoDTEP rates for your product. Some practical questions and answers for RoDTEP scheme. What happens if the intention to avail benefit under RoDTEP is not mentioned in shipping bill? You have to go for amendment of shipping bill. There is no other option. Can EPCG and drawback scheme be simultaneously claimed with RoDTEP? There is no restriction on that. It can be claimed. Can unlimited benefits on goods exported be claimed, or is there a ceiling? Scheme is under overall budget outlay. Indication is that there could be ceiling on maximum benefit within the overall budget. But right now, I think government has not put any ceiling, and they are remitting the amount. Whether benefit can be claimed if consideration is received in INR. Ideally, no, but there are cases wherein the consideration is received in INR, it is considered equivalent to foreign currency, like remittance is coming from the Nostro or Vostro account, then it is considered equivalent to foreign exchange. In that situation also, you can claim duty drawback, you can claim RoDTEP, and those supplies can also be counted for advance authorization and EPCG authorizations. Can mover factory claim the RoDTEP benefit? Yes, it is allowed. What happens if I have got excess amount of RoDTEP or duty drawback by any mistake, maybe my mistake or government's mistake? It is always advisable to voluntarily go and report it back to the government and return that benefit to the government. If they come to know and they issue us a notice, obviously they may put you under the category of risky exporter, and then a lot of troubles will follow. Now, EOU and STP schemes. EOU and STP schemes are quite old schemes. The objective of this scheme is to incentivize the exporter industries in one umbrella scheme, wherein they can take the benefit of concessional duties on capital goods as well as raw material under one scheme. They don't have to go for advance authorization and EPCG separately. What can be imported under these schemes is raw material, packing material, fuels, spares, mold, dyes, furniture, DG set, air conditioning system, and all other kinds of capital goods which are used in the production of goods or services. Who can take benefit? Manufacturer as well as service providers. Both can take benefit. It is very important to note that the trading activities are not allowed in the EOU or STP. How to get the benefit? So whatever imports you do, the raw material consumables or capital goods, they all will be free of your import taxes. If you do any kind of local procurement, then you will pay IGST and the refund of it would be granted to you. And alongside that, deemed export benefit will also be available, which we will discuss later. Against this benefit, your entire factory or the service premise will be considered a sacrosanct area wherein no other activity would be permitted. Means you can do only activities which are permitted by the SEG authorities or STP authorities in that premise. Any duty-free material, if you want to remove, you will need permission from the authorities. So little bit restrictions are there on uses of premise also, unlike EOU and EPCG scheme. But the benefits are numerous under this particular scheme. This scheme was about to die. Why I say so? Because government said that we will not allow IGST exemption under this particular scheme, under GST regime, and we will, gradually or after some period of time, we will start charging IGST, and only exemption you will get would be of BCD. However, on 30th June 2020, government has somehow, for the benefit of us, has relaxed that condition, and they have said that the IGST exemption will now continue without any limitation of time. So this scheme, which was not a very attractive scheme earlier, has become attractive again. And those who are considering to come out of STP scheme or EOU, because the benefits were limited, compliances were higher, they have now a reason to revisit their considerations and examine whether they should continue, they should really exit or not. EOU and STP scheme, in my view, are nowhere less than the SEG scheme. Why I say so? Because under SEG scheme, you have a lot of restrictions. If you want to do work from home under SEG law, you would have seen there was a lot of anxiety amongst the industry as to whether it will be allowed or not allowed. Under STP scheme, there was no such anxiety, and STP authorities were quite liberal in allowing companies to work from home. Likewise, business contingency plan, if you want to make a business contingency plan, you want to create a site where all your data is stored or your additional capacity is created. Under SEG law, that is very difficult because you have to operate in a particular zone. Anything you cannot do outside that zone. But under STP scheme, you can take another premise, add that premise in your existing STP registration, and that premise can be easily used. And there are no big compliances like under the SEG scheme. Under SEG scheme, if you want to sell the laptops or electronic items after import, then some customs jurisdictions are saying that you need a DGFT license because they are now used goods, and import of used electronic items requires a DGFT license, and MOEF approval somehow probably they are not aware so far. They are insisting on DGFT approval. These problems are not there in EOU or STP scheme. So in my view, the EOU and STP schemes have become again attractive, and one should continue under these schemes unless there is really a significant problem. Under EOU or STP scheme, if you want to import any restricted goods, then that is allowed without any authorization. What are restricted goods? Suppose if you are doing R&D and you want to import 1 liter of any particular grade of petrol, you cannot import that in India. For importing 1 liter of petrol, you need a license which is given to state trading enterprises, or government grants it to the refineries. They can only import any quantity of petrol. But if you are sitting in EOU, that condition doesn't apply. You can import that without any restriction. So that benefit is, though it is available to SEG also, but this kind of similar distinctive features are available to EOU and STP also, which are not there in advanced authorization and the EPCG scheme. Now, what are the benefits under EOU and STP scheme? On imports, we discussed there are no customs duty on import of services, pay IGST under RCM, take credit. In case of domestic procurements, buy whatever you want to buy, but refund would be granted to you. Deemed export benefits are again available. In case of services, similar provisions. On sale, no customs, no GST, no customs duty. In case of DTA sale, you have to pay regular GST. And whatever customs duty you had said on import, that you have to surrender back. Clear? So I would repeat this again, that in case of domestic sale by EOU or STP, you have to pay regular GST on sale value, and the duty paid on the imported raw material, which is used in the sale of domestic products, will have to be surrendered back. Otherwise, there is no requirement to pay back any duties. There is no requirement to use capital goods in particular number of years, like in EPCG scheme. You have to complete export obligation within 6 years. You have to complete your imports within 12 months. There are no such restrictions under EOU and STP scheme, and you are, it's quite easy to operate under this scheme in my view. Status holder. This is something very interesting, and I recommend that every exporter should take the status holder certificate from the government based on his eligibility, because there are no compliances to it and there are many upsides. Now, what is the objective of the scheme? Objective is to incentivize or to encourage the exporters to do more exports. Exporters of goods or services who want to take the status, they have to have IEC on the date of application. They have to have IEC on the date of application. This is different from the provision which we discussed earlier, wherein government said that the IEC should be there on the date of export. So this particular provision is an exception to that particular rule, wherein government has now inserted that the IEC should be there on the date of export of goods or services. Under the status holder scheme, on the date of application to the government, you should have IEC. Now, whatever you export and you realize in foreign currency, that is counted as to consider you as export, status holder. What is double weightage? So this is very unique term which is used in the status holder scheme. Double weightage means the one export consignment will be counted under two schemes. That is called double weightage or double count. So that double weightage will be granted to 1-star status holder category. Double weightage will also be allowed to MSME, BIS, ISO certified units and certain other units. So if they have taken any other benefit in that particular scheme, also that export will be counted, and it will also be counted for taking the status holder benefit. Now, what are the benefits under status holder scheme? Exemption from furnishing of bank guarantee for schemes under FTP, like advance authorization or EPCG. If you are a status holder, you don't need to give any bank guarantee. Fixation of input-output norms within 60 days. If you are STP, then you can do DTA sale permission, means domestic sale permission, and you don't need any permission, only intimation needs to be given to the authority. Authorization and customs clearances for import and exports on self-declaration basis. Exemption from compulsory negotiation of document through banks. And these are other benefits which are listed here. Now, what are the monetary limits to get the status or status holder certificate? In this particular FTP, government has significantly relaxed the monetary limits. For 1-star export house, earlier it was 3 million, which continues to be 3 million now. For 2-star export house, it has been reduced by 10 million. For 3-star by 50 million, 4-star 300 million, and for 5-star by 1200 million. So if you are doing export of this much of goods or services, then you can apply to DGFT authority with the export proof, and they will grant you the status and you will be eligible for benefit. Earlier, your export performance was necessary in at least 2 out of 4 years. But here and now, under the current policy, government has said that export performance is necessary in all the 3 financial years. So past 3 financial years, you should have continuously done the exports. Then only you will get the status holder. And to compute the threshold, your current and previous 3 financial years export will be considered. Status holder certificate, once granted, will be valid for a period of 5 years. And there are no compliances to it, so there is no harm in taking the status from the government. We have to move a little fast. I think we are running short of time. So clubbing of various scheme. So how to take maximum benefit under various scheme? I have presented it here with the help of this chart. So wherever it's green, you can make those combinations and take these benefits together. Deemed exports. So deemed exports are benefits under which the supplies are within India, payment is made in INR, still they are considered export, and you are allowed benefit under FTP as well as GST law. Under GST law, if somebody is supplying the goods or material to advance authorization, EPCG or EOU, then GST is paid, but it can be claimed back as refund from the government. Under the FTP, deemed export drawback and the refund of terminal excise duty is available. Terminal excise duty is nothing but excise duty, which is now applicable on petroleum products and natural gas. And this benefit is granted by DGFT authorities. In addition to this, there are certain more categories of specified projects wherein the deemed export benefit is allowed under the foreign trade policy. So I'm not going much this into detail. Deemed export drawback, we can discuss this for 30 seconds. So when somebody is supplying the material to any advance authorization holder or EPCG holder locally, so he can claim the refund of GST payable, number one. Alongside that, he can also claim drawback from DGFT authorities. So dual benefit is available here. That is something we can see in case of our sales to EPCG or advance authorization or EOUs. SCOMET is very important for us to understand. So you would see that the goods are going from one country to another country in containers. It is not possible for all the countries to track all the containers or examine all the containers. That is why the export control regulations have been made in each country. The Indian export control regulations are called SCOMET regulations. Under these, there are 8 chapters, and if anyone is exporting the goods or material falling under any of these chapters, then he has to take permission from DGFT authorities or Department of Atomic Energy for export of this item. Not only material, but the technology or the software related to any of the products which are mentioned here will be requiring a permission from the authorities. Why SCOMET list has been made? Because there are many products which can be put to civil use as well as military use. And if they fall in the hands of terrorists or the countries which do not follow the international regulations like North Korea, then they can use them for military purpose, and it will be perceived that India is supporting those countries. So every country likewise has maintained or incorporated the SCOMET or the export control regulations to control the export of products which can be put to dual use. So dual use is the key term which is used in the export control regulations. So this is very important to follow. In India, it is not very religiously followed due to lack of awareness, because we are under the self declaration scheme or the self-assessment scheme under Indian customs regulations, wherein whatever we declare, customs authorities accept that. So they do not follow it very religiously. But if there is any violation, then customs authority is going to catch us and penalize us. So it is very important for us to examine whether our export products, particularly the technological products, chemical products, can be used in military application as well as civil applications. Amnesty scheme, as we discussed earlier, covers only advance authorization and EPCG authorization. The scheme is not part of foreign trade policy, but has been announced through a public notice. Just give me a minute. Yeah, sorry. So this scheme does not cover defaults under EOU schemes, STP or duty drawback. This only covers defaults under advance authorization and EPCG authorization. Now, what is the coverage of this scheme? This scheme covers the advance authorizations and EPCG authorizations which have been issued under FTP 2009-14, which was valid till 31st March 2015. And all other previous FTPs are also covered under this particular scheme, provided the export obligation was for those authorizations was valid till 12th August 2013. If export obligation had expired prior to this date, then the benefit under these schemes is not available. Now, advance and EPCG authorization issued under last FTP, which was 15 to 20, is absolutely not covered. What is the benefit if you have not fulfilled the export obligation partly or fully? Then duties need to pay back to the government in that proportion, in proportion to incomplete export obligation. But the interest which is payable at the rate of 15% will be payable only on the basic customs duty. The interest on additional customs duty and special additional customs duty need not be paid back. So this is the key benefit under the scheme. So substantial saving of interest is possible. But another point to be noted here is that the CVD and SAT paid under the amnesty scheme are not available as credit or refund. So that will be a cost. Interest is a saving, but they will be these amounts paid will be cost. Application for amnesty needs to be paid to the DGFT authority by 30th June. And then they will confirm the duty amount by 30th September. And application for this will be filed with the DGFT in the portal. If there is a 100% default, then there is no question and there is no worry. You can pay the duty straightforward and approach DGFT. But if there is a partial default, then submit your documents and DGFT will confirm you the amount to be paid. If you have already paid the duty and the interest few days back prior to 31st March, then you are not eligible for this scheme and you cannot claim the refund of money already paid and then apply under this scheme. So if the money is already gone, then that's a total loss. If there are any cases pending at any level of adjudication or appeal, then they can also be closed under this particular scheme. I think we have exceeded our time. Now it's time for question and answers. I'll take them. The first question is from Mr. Jayanta Bandyopadhyay. He's asking whether mover is viable option now. Should we come out and then how? Yeah, mover is a viable option. I won't say it's not a viable option, but depending upon the kind of investment you are doing. Now, since IGST exemption is not available under mover, DCT exemption is still there. So, if in your product there is, or if in your product in your project there is a lot of capex involved, then you can still consider mover. Or otherwise, I think you can parallelly examine moving to EOU or STP. That I think would give you the equal kind of benefit. What are the benefits available to service providers, say advocates, CA, and other professionals under FTP? Sir, I'm really very sorry. I also started my practice recently. There is no benefit to us. SEIS scheme has been discontinued. Whether the term input has been defined in FTP? Yes, I think in chapter 9, input has been defined, but input is generally referred as the raw material under foreign trade policy. Gopal Krishna Hegde is asking whether duty drawback is available to manufacturer exporter. Yes, it is available. It is available mainly to manufacturer exporters. So if you are manufacturing and exporting, yes, you should do it. Another question is, when session on Amnesty Scheme, we discussed that. Sorry for delay. Can we claim drawback as merchant exporter and avail IGST refund benefit? Can we claim drawback as we are merchant? Yeah, as a merchant exporter, you can claim drawback. That's not a problem at all. And merchant exporters are eligible for drawback. And IGST refund also you can claim. There is no bar on that. Unable to listen or see, I think it was others can see me, or there is any problem? So Abhishek is asking whether non-STPI registration with STPI of India also eligible for benefit under STP scheme. IGST refund on local procurement for capital goods also permissible. No, Abhishek. If you take non-STP registration, then you don't get the IGST refund. You have to take proper STP registration, then only this benefit will come to you. Abhishek is again asking whether company can claim duty drawback and IGST refund together for export of goods without payment of tax. Yes, you can do that. Goods, another question is, goods imported under DFIA, can such material be supplied domestically? Goods imported can, no. If you, if you have imported the goods under DFIA, so that is the key feature of DFIA scheme, that the license and material can be transferred locally. Unlike advance authorization scheme where the material cannot be sold locally. A company can have how many IEC? A company can have only one IEC. IEC is linked to your PAN number. Nowadays, your PAN is designated as IEC after registration with DGFT. Gaurang Goyal is asking, our EPCG license was issued in 2004 and EO was to be completed latest by March 12. Are we eligible for Amnesty scheme? I think you are not eligible for Amnesty scheme because last date for EO completion should have been August 2013 to be eligible for Amnesty scheme. But you can send me details and we can discuss as to what can be done. Mansi Gatke is asking, chapter included under SCOMET list. Mansi, sorry, your question is not clear to me. I will send this presentation to you, then you can contact me separately. Sure, Anish is asking for the presentation. I will provide you that. Now, Purushottam Gopalan is asking, specific EO is to be completed, but average EO is not completed. Amnesty scheme available for such cases? I think no. You have to first complete the average EO, then only specific EO will start. If you don't do that, then otherwise amnesty is not available. But you can share the detail with me. We can see as to what are the best possible options in this. Any specific benefit for service providers like freight forwarding entities? For freight forwarding entities, I think you being a service provider, there is no specific benefit as of now. You can only take the AEO status. If you are using CapEx, then the mover benefit is there for you. EPCG also you can take, but then you have to have some export billing as well as a freight forwarder. Raja Manivanam is asking, potassium chloride is not specifically mentioned as SCOMET list, and also the chemical component is also not as in the annexures of SCOMET. Is it mandatory for SCOMET license for export? Mr. Raja, we need to see this in detail. I mean, all the items of this particular potassium chloride or variants of it, I'm not able to recall right now in the SCOMET list. So I need to see. You can send to me this question separately, and then I'll answer. Whether RoDTEP will be paid even if the budget is not available, I don't have answer to this. If the budget is not available, probably they will not give it. How can bank verify goods imported? It's same as declared in the 15 CSCB. Any feedback mechanism? So bank actually do not monitor the goods which are which kind of goods are coming or going. Bank only goes by the documentation which you submit to them, and mostly they are concerned with the knocking of the payables or receivables which are reported in their EDPMS system. I think this, Anish, answers your query. Which chapter is of SCOMET list? Mansi is asking. I will tell you, Mansi. This is chapter 10 of foreign trade policy, Mansi. So the old Raja is again asking, sir, the old MEIS, will the exporter receive the benefit of it? So what is the problem in that, Raja? I would like to understand that. Why did you not get the benefit? Was it because of the monetary limit which government had introduced, or there was some other problem? So if you can elaborate me the problem later, I can help you with an answer to